Avraham Meyer Eisenberg. That is the name of the man behind the $112 million exploit of Solana-based DeFi protocol mangomarkets. Now, Eisenberg's name was linked to the attack thanks to the efforts of independent reporter Chris Burnett, who published an article outlining Eisenberg's involvement with the group behind the mangomarkets exploit. This happened less than 24 hours after the attack took place, an impressive feat of investigation. To back his claims, Burnett provided evidence in the form of leaked Discord chat screenshots that revealed Eisenberg's ENS address and attack strategy. Interestingly, this doesn't seem to be Eisenberg's first crypto heist, so to speak. He's previously been accused of embezzling $14 million from Fortress DAO in February, manipulating lending protocol Fuse's liquidation mechanism in April, and unsuccessfully attempting to exploit the decentralized arbitration protocol Kleros via its claims process. Now, that all makes for quite a rap sheet. However, it doesn't seem like Eisenberg has caught the attention of law enforcement agencies yet. This is probably why he believes his attacks are perfectly legal. Yes, you did hear that correctly. After being doxxed for the mangomarkets exploit, Eisenberg posted a tweet in which he described his shenanigans as, quote, legal open market actions, which were part of a, quote, highly profitable trading strategy. Well, I guess that's one way to look at it. Now, this tweet obviously pushed crypto Twitter into overdrive, with users debating the legality of Eisenberg's actions. Some pushed the code is law ideology, while others called the exploit a case of market manipulation. But it all boils down to a fundamental question. Are DeFi exploits legal? Now, I'm even less of a lawyer than I am a financial advisor, but the answer to that question couldn't be as straightforward as a yes or no. Or could it? Why don't we find out by taking a closer look at the merits of the argument presented by both sides. So, let's start by listing the different kinds of DeFi hacks we've seen regularly happen and whether they could potentially fall within the purview of recognized offenses in regulated markets. To keep it simple, I've broadly categorized the most common DeFi protocol attacks into 3 types. Now, the first is the price manipulation attack. Some recent examples of price manipulation include the mangomarkets and moolah market exploits. This typically sees the attacker artificially inflating the price of a target token. This can either be done on the source market by taking advantage of a market pair's thin liquidity, or the protocol's price oracle through a cycle of calculated trades and borrowings. The inflated token is then used as collateral in the targeted DeFi protocol to drain its lending pool before arbitrage operations bring down the artificially inflated price. Now, from a legal perspective, these series of trades typically qualify as market manipulation, a type of white-collar crime in regulated markets. Based on the jurisdiction, the attacker could be liable for varying degrees of civil and criminal penalties, such as imprisonment and fines. The second attack type is smart contract vulnerabilities. As the name suggests, poor coding of a smart contract allows an attacker to execute the functions of said smart contract in a manner not intended by its creator. And the most famous example of a smart contract vulnerability exploit is, yep, you guessed it, the reentrancy attack on the DAO back in 2016. Now, legally, the closest offense resembling attacks using smart contract vulnerabilities would be that of hacking. Though to bring a case of hacking against the attacker, one would need to establish that they used the smart contract in a manner that was unauthorized or not intended by its creator. This is where the questions begin to pile up. How do you establish the intended use of a smart contract? Is it inferred from its code, or perhaps by the terms and conditions published on the front-end interface connected to the smart contract? As I mentioned before, we've got proponents for both sides of the argument here. But at the end of the day, governance or regulation is nothing but social consensus. So, whether it's code or law, the correct answer is whatever the majority settles upon. Now, a simpler solution, from a legal standpoint at least, would be to regulate DeFi protocols, which is, as they say on Twitter, an unpopular opinion. User protection or decentralization? It seems we can't have both. Okay, so putting that frankly white-hot potato down, the third attack type is the social engineering attack. Now, these involve the use of psychological tricks and misrepresentations to approve malicious transactions or to steal sensitive data such as private keys. Examples of social engineering attacks include phishing, email fraud, and romance scams. Now, just recently, we saw a crypto variant of romance scams emerge called, quote, pig butchering scams. Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't sound all that romantic, does it? Now, these involve romance scams in which the victims are convinced to invest in fake crypto trading platforms. Legally, then, most social engineering attacks in the DeFi space are punishable as fraud and are already recognized as separate offenses in most jurisdictions. So, now that we have a good idea about the various types of attacks and the closest legal offenses for them, let's address the two key problems with prosecuting DeFi crimes: jurisdiction and the lack of a regulatory framework. Determining the jurisdiction for attacks on a decentralized protocol can be a tad time-consuming. The jurisdiction for crimes in cyberspace typically lies with the country of the victim or defendant, or with the country in which the cause of action arose. However, for crimes conducted on decentralized networks like blockchains, it becomes a little bit more complex to determine jurisdiction based on the location of the cause of action. Now, that said, we did see the SEC take a swing at this in its recent lawsuit against crypto influencer Ian Bellina. Paragraph 69. The SEC submitted that it had jurisdiction over the transactions in question on account of them being validated by Ethereum nodes, quote, clustered more densely in the United States than in any other country. Now, if you follow my weekly newsletter, you'll already know why I think the court wouldn't waste time deciding jurisdiction on that line of argument. Bellina's case had much easier grounds on which the SEC could be granted jurisdiction. That said, the day we see courts pondering the validity of node-based jurisdiction might not be too far off. And speaking of regulations, we've arrived at our second problem, the lack of regulatory frameworks. Crypto markets are predominantly unregulated. Most countries have just begun introducing and testing regulatory frameworks. Without proper laws in place, it becomes hard to seek remedies and file cases for losses suffered in DeFi hacks. It also becomes extremely hard to enforce any penalties secured against the defendant when they reside in a regulatory grey area. Some countries have begun making more aggressive plays in enforcement, the most notable of which being the good old US of A. Now, US market regulators like the SEC and CFTC have made aggressive plays against entities in the crypto space, from suing one of the largest crypto companies out there to suing a DAO. Meanwhile, OFAC, a division of the Treasury Department, recently imposed sanctions on decentralized mixing protocol Tornado Cash. All three are proactively taking a regulation by enforcement approach to crypto, or, as I like to describe it, shoot first, explain rules later. Which brings us back to the sticky subject of regulations. Regulation by enforcement is clearly not the way to go, as all it does is create uncertainty and stifle innovation. If projects are going to be able to build and create value, well, then they're going to need at least some guidelines or legislation to navigate by. Without these, projects will be flying blind, and many creators will err on the side of caution and not build anything at all, rather than risk seeing their hard work destroyed when a 3- or 4-letter agency throws the book at it. Now, the mere word regulation is enough to get many in the crypto space hot under the collar, but the fact remains that either the SEC et al. Change their approach, or the boundaries get at least some definition, which can at least afford projects some degree of protection. The alternative, I'm afraid, is chaos.
Tell my granddaughter I existed!
And speaking of chaos, it seems Avraham Eisenberg is on something of a roll in that regard. As we were putting this video together, news emerged that he'd been up to yet more tricks, this time deploying a shitcoin called Mango Inu in order to trick token-buying bots into hoovering up much of the supply, before he rug pulled, apparently netting $250,000 in the process. Now, as much as this chap isn't exactly one of the good guys, the last word on this needs to be left to him. So, from a tweet he posted after the exploit, quote, "The other day, I deployed a shitcoin called Mango Inu and did absolutely no promotion. It got over 250k invested/gambled in like half an hour. We're still so far away from the bottom. To be clear, if you buy this, you will definitely lose all your money."